Before the sun warms the stone, before the bread hardens on the table, before even thought dares to rise, there is silence. A silence so ancient, it no longer feels like the absence of sound, but something older, something woven into the very breath of this place. In the year 1284, a monastery waits, hidden beyond the fields, behind a low wall of weathered stone, nestled under skies that rarely change. This is where time folds inward. This is where sound unlearns itself. And tonight, just for a while, this is where you will be. But before we begin, take a moment. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Which part of the world have you brought with you into this silence? And what time is it where you are? Midnight? Early morning? Let us connect across hours, across borders, with a simple comment below. And if you find calm in these quiet journeys, I invite you to like this story and subscribe, not just to support this small, sleepy corner of the internet, but to remind yourself to return to quiet, return to stillness. Now, let us breathe in together. Inhale slowly. The story begins not with sound, but with stillness. The monastery does not wake in the way a village might. There is no crow of a rooster, no chatter of footsteps or clatter of wood. There's only the low bell, a single hollow note that falls into the valley like mist. It does not ask, it declares. You do not remember when you fell asleep, only that you were cold, and now you are cold again. The cell is still dark. The walls are rough and damp, the blanket thin and folded too tightly to unfold without ceremony. Your eyes blink open to find nothing. There's no fire here. No candle left burning through the night. Just your breath, visible, soft, a fading cloud in the air. You rise not because you want to, but because it is what is done. The floor is colder than you imagined. Your feet feel it more than your mind can process. You dress in wool that scratches, sandals with cracked leather, a hood that doesn't warm so much as mute the world around you. The silence is so complete, you begin to hear things, not sounds from outside, but the soft inner workings of your body, your breath, your swallow, the faint beat of your heart. And you realize this is the volume of your life now. You walk slowly, others walk too, but no one speaks. The hallway is dim, lit by narrow slits in the stone where morning has not yet reached. Your shadow joins others, long and ghost-like, stretched across walls that have seen hundreds just like you and will see hundreds more. You try to remember what day it is. Monday? Feast day? Does it matter? Inside these walls, time does not carry names. It only carries prayers. And so you arrive not at a room, but a presence, a gathering of silence. The chapel is colder than the cell. Benches line the stone floor, and men in robes kneel with practiced stillness. You mimic them poorly. Your knees creak, your breath feels too loud, and then the chant begins. Not a song, not a melody, a drone, a low wave of syllables. You do not understand, rising like fog and falling like ash. You want to feel part of it. You want to dissolve into it. But you are not yet hollow enough. One monk coughs, just once. The sound is deafening. You look over, and no one reacts. It is not a break. It is a thread in the fabric. You close your eyes and try to be less than yourself. Try to disappear into the stone, into the silence, into the ritual. But your mind drifts. It thinks of warmth, of voices, of wind and fire, and you wonder, already how many hours are left? How long before you forget that speaking was once something you could do? This is only the beginning. The sun has not yet touched the walls. The bread is still hard, and your thoughts, they are still too loud. The day does not begin with words, but with one slow, low bell, not a cheerful chime or a call, but a sound that feels like a verdict passed from stone to soul, a sound that doesn't rise but sinks, landing softly inside your chest like the weight of something ancient and absolute. It reaches you before your eyes open, not as noise, but as pressure, a shift in the air, as though even silence itself has been instructed to make room. You blink, not into brightness, but into the gray dimness of a room that is not yours. A room shaped by discipline and cold, a cell built with intention, each stone placed to resist comfort, each shadow drawn by centuries of repetition. Your back is sore from the plank bed, your breath floats like mist, and the woolen blanket has slipped halfway to the floor during the night, offering no warmth, only the memory of weight. You sit up slowly, your spine reluctant, your muscles unsure if rest ever happened, and already your mind begins to count not thoughts, not plans, but hours. How long until the next bell, the next kneel, the next wordless meal? How long until the silence breaks you or absorbs you? You reach for your robe, stiff and heavy, made not for warmth, but for sameness, for the erasure of difference all are. Dressed alike here, not in humility but in obedience, a quiet surrender stitched into every hem. Your sandals are cracked, the leather dry and unforgiving, and yet they are not yours, not really, just another item on the list of things assigned to you for this borrowed existence. You do not know the monk who slept here before you, nor the king who one who will come after, but you know you are already walking in their posture, already breathing their silence, already stepping into a shape that was made long before your time and will endure long after it. The hallway is colder than your cell, which you did not think possible. Your feet make soft contact with the stones beneath, not loud enough to echo, just enough to remind you that you exist. You pass others not quickly, not slowly, just moving, and no one looks at you, no one needs to. The silence between you is not awkward. It is structural, foundational, as necessary as the stones in the walls or the dust in the corners. Overhead, the beams creak gently, the wind beyond the walls hums low, but inside, there is only the sound of fabric brushing fabric, feet meeting floor, and the constant, quiet awareness of ritual. The chapel appears before you like something. Carved out of darkness, not lit so much as less dim than the hall. There are no windows, only slits high and narrow which allow thin lines of gray light to fall like threads onto the floor, not illuminating, but suggesting the presence of space. Benches line the stone ground, unadorned, unpadded, unwelcoming. And men in identical robes are already kneeling, already folded into stillness, already vanishing into the rhythm of things. You hesitate for a moment, not out of fear, but because the very air tells you that hesitation is unwelcome, unnatural, unnecessary, so you kneel. Imperfectly, with joints that complain and bones that do not yet know this cold. The bell has stopped, but it rings still inside your body. You hear it in the space between your breaths, in the pause before each swallow. No one speaks, of course, and yet a murmur begins, low and even, syllables rising together like smoke, like mist, not in melody, not in harmony, but in one long, flat wave of repetition. The monks chant not to express, but to erase, not to be heard, but to dissolve. The words are Latin, mostly, and old, older than the voices that speak them, older even than the ears that once first listened. They fill the space not with sound, but with structure, like beams in a roof or bones in a body necessary, hidden, essential dot you try to follow. Your lips move. Your voice does not. You are not sure if your silence is respect or fear, reverence or uncertainty. You are still an outsider, still thinking in time, still hoping for the warmth of comprehension. But this place is not designed for understanding, it is designed for surrender. Your thoughts drift, again, unwillingly. You think of beds, of sun through windows, of laughter, of scent, of color. And then you force yourself back to the stone, to the cold, to the murmuring. Breath of men who have let go of the things you still remember. The chant ends not with a final word, but with its own absence. It simply stops. The men rise without cue. You do the same clumsily. Your knees ache. The silence returns, more complete now, more present than before. as though the chant was a brief opening in a wall that has now closed again. You walk back through the hallway towards something you are not sure how to name. Breakfast, duty, stillness. It does not matter. What matters is that the bell has rung, and you have begun. You have entered the day, not as yourself, but as someone. Shaped by silence, held in stillness, measured not in moments, but in the absence of noise. The bell that broke the morning did not wake you. It ended you. The morning meal does not greet you, it waits, already prepared before the sun itself dares show its face, laid out in quiet defiance of hunger and hospitality alike. And when you enter the refectory, following a line of silent, identical shapes, in brown robes, it does not feel like you've come to eat, but like you've come to remember how not to speak. The room is long, its walls rough and wet with breath from centuries past, and narrow windows bleed a thin wash of morning light across the stone floor, as if dawn, too, is reluctant to fully arrive in such a place. You sit without instruction. Because instruction is not spoken here, it is learned by imitation, by absorption, by repetition so deep it reaches beyond behavior into the marrow. A wooden bowl, chipped but clean, rests in front of you, and inside, one torn hunk of yesterday's bread, cold and gray at the edges, and beside it, a cup of water, so still you hesitate to touch it for fear of disturbing its fragile peace. There is no grace said aloud, but the entire room hums with unspoken ritual, and so you bow your head with the others, hands folded not in hunger, but in submission, not in gratitude, but in readiness for another hour lived under rule. The bread is hard, but not impossible, and as your teeth press into it you find no taste, only the texture of labor, of preservation, of a life built not on pleasure, but on endurance. Chewing is slow, not by choice but by necessity, and you become aware of how loud your own mouth sounds in this still chamber, how even the scrape of your fingers against the rim of the bowl feels intrusive, as if the act of feeding yourself is something to be done discreetly, almost shamefully, with no acknowledgement of need. Around you, the monks eat in coordinated silence, a kind of choreography written not with movement, but with stillness. No glances are exchanged, no sounds escape but the soft rhythm of restrained chewing, and it occurs to you that here, food is not meant to nourish joy, but to discipline the body into forgetting joy exists. Your water tastes of stone and chill, but you drink it anyway, slowly, letting the cold flow through your center like a quiet river, not refreshing, but grounding. Beside your bowl sits a small strip of parchment, inked with the rules for this day, though you can hardly tell them apart from the rules of the day before, or the day before that they repeat like the walls, like the bells, like the silence. And each line reads like a door closing. You are not to speak. You are not to question. You are not to seek pleasure. You are not to disturb the silence. You are not to remember too much. The rules are longer than the prayers, and far less forgiving. They are not meant to be understood, only obeyed, and as you read them over with the others, not aloud but in a collective mental murmur, you realize that the purpose here is not clarity, it is weight. The words are a yoke, and you have agreed, knowingly or not, to wear it. One monk across from you shifts slightly, just enough to draw your attention, and for a split second your eyes meet, but he does not see you, not truly, not as a person. You are both ghosts, floating in the same hall of stone, holding the same bread, bound by the same invisible vow to vanish into rhythm. You finish your meal slowly, not because you savor it, but because there is nothing else to do with time here. There are no conversations, no glances out of windows, no leaning back in thought. You chew, and when the bread is gone, the silence remains, stronger now, as if it has fed too, grown fatter, louder, more absolute. You sit with your hands folded, the bowl empty before you, and your stomach neither full nor empty, just quiet like everything else. And when the bell tolls again, not for prayer, but for movement, for duty, for the next shape in this long pattern of the day, You rise with the others, not knowing where you are going, only that you must go. As you step away from the table, your robe brushing the leg of the bench, you glance down at the rule parchment one last time. It has no ending, no signature, no blessing. It is not meant to be finished, only followed. And as your footsteps blend with the soft procession of monastic routine, you feel yourself fading slightly, not from hunger, but from voice. The silence sits beside you still, but you suspect it now lives inside you too, and it has eaten more than you have. The corridor that leads you into the cloister is narrow, built not for movement, but for transition, a space between thoughts where even your breath feels intrusive. And as you pass beneath the low stone arch, you step not just into open air, but into a silence so dense it clings to the skin like cold fog. The cloister is a square of repetition, 4 stone walls enclosing a patch of trimmed earth and packed soil. A single tree at the center that does not bloom but endures, bare and watchful, as if it too were bound by the vows that hold this place together. You join the slow procession already circling the perimeter, heads down, hands tucked into wide sleeves, feet shuffling in sandals that whisper rather than step, and though no one speaks, the sound of solace brushing against stone forms a rhythm. A soft sacred cadence that replaces conversation, prayer, thought, everything. You walk as the others walk. You do not ask where to look or how fast to go. You follow. Because to lead, even internally, would feel arrogant. Around and around you go, and with each circuit, the path becomes less physical and more mental, a looping of thought, a closing. In, you try to focus on the cold air brushing your cheeks, on the pale morning light that filters down like faded parchment, on the sound of the bell now faded behind you, but your mind resists like a door that won't close, letting memory leak through. Voices, colors, laughter, the smell of warmth, all unwelcome here. You try to quiet it. You try to be like the others, but even your thoughts feel too loud. You hear them as if they were being spoken aloud, echoing through your body, reverberating off the stone with a kind of guilt that is hard to name. You lower your gaze, not out of humility, but because eye contact feels like it might shatter something fragile, the illusion that you belong, the shared agreement that none of this is too much. The ground beneath you is uneven in places, and the worn edges of the paving stones have grown smooth from centuries of footsteps. Thousands of silent pilgrims who walked this same path in the same robes, with the same longing to disappear into discipline. And maybe that's the goal, not to reach a destination, but to erase the need for one. To walk not toward something, but away from everything else. You pass the same tree again. It has not moved. Nor have you, not really. Only the thought of movement remains, a suggestion that time is passing, even if nothing else changes. The wind shifts slightly, rustling the hem of your robe, and you feel, briefly, like a leaf suspended, rootless, caught in a space between stillness and falling. There is no instruction to stop, no signal that the walking is over. Someone simply turns away, and the line follows, dissolving back into the monastery as if the morning had never happened. And as you step back through the archway, your ears ring with the absence of your own voice, and the silence greets you again, this time from within. You are led through a narrow wooden door that groans softly on its hinges, not loud enough to echo, but just enough to remind you that even here, movement makes noise unwelcome, unnecessary noise, and the room you step into is dim and dust-heavy, lit by 3 narrow slits in the stone wall that offer no warmth, only a reluctant grayness that allows ink to be seen but not celebrated. The scriptorium is not what you imagine, not romantic, not ornate. It is colder than the cloister, and somehow more silent than the chapel. A place where sound does not even think of entering, where time breathes slowly and memory wears. Rows of long desks stretch across the room, each with a single stool and a single page, a small knife, an inkpot, a candle stub, and a task. And when you sit, you realize at once that you are not meant to think, only to copy. The manuscript before you is already open, already marked, already waiting for your obedience. And the script you must reproduce is dense, elegant, and unfamiliar, its letters curling like vines over stone, beautiful in the way rules sometimes. Air, symmetrical, inescapable, silent. The quill is awkward in your hand. You have held pens before, but never like this, not with reverence. Not with the awareness that mistakes are sins of ink and will stain not just the page but your presence. Here, you dip carefully, slowly, letting the point drink just enough of the dark liquid, not too much or it will blot, not too little or the line will tremble and fail. Everything here is balance, posture, patience. The first stroke is thin, but it holds, and so you begin copying a line you cannot read, in a language you almost recognize, but will not question. You do not ask what the words mean because questions are not permitted in this space, neither aloud nor inside your head, and so your mind, craving to move, to stretch, begins instead to wander in ways it should not. You think of voices again. Your mother's, perhaps, or a friend's, or your own, but the sound is fuzzy now, like an echo from a different life, and it fades faster than it used to. Your spine aches from the stool, too narrow and too upright, and you shift slightly, only to feel the cold of the wood bite into a new part of your back. Your hand cramps after only a few lines, the motion of the quill repetitive and exacting, each letter requiring more discipline than thought, and it becomes clear that this work is not about content, it is about control. The point is not to learn or to understand, but to endure, to show that you can be still for longer than your thoughts. Around you, others copy in the same rhythm, some faster, some slower, but none distracted. The room hums with the faint scratch of pen against parchment, the occasional sigh muffled behind closed lips, the almost imperceptible crackle of a candle guttering low. No one looks up. No one leans back. No one seems to remember that the world outside exists at all. And, in time, not quickly, but eventually you begin to lose track of your own resistance. Your thoughts dull, your inner voice grows quiet, and you find yourself no longer wondering about the words, no longer aching to finish, but simply continuing line after line, letter after letter, as if the writing were not an act you performed, but something that passed through you. A fly lands on your hand, and you do not flinch. It crawls across your knuckle and leaves, and you do not follow it with your eyes. The candle beside you flickers low, and the shadow of your own fingers dances across the page like something foreign, but you do not stop. You become the hand, the ink, the script. The repetition and the silence is no longer a pressure, but a presence, like a second cloak draped around your shoulders, whispering that this is the shape of your life now. And when at last the bell tolls again, soft, distant, calling you not to speak, but to shift, you set down the quill slowly, carefully, your hand stained with ink and trembling not from haste but from stillness. And you realize that you cannot remember what you copied, only that you copied it well enough to be allowed to stop. You stand. You bow your head. You leave the room without looking back. The words stay behind, quiet, unread, and perfect. The bell calls you again, not with urgency, but with inevitability, a low, familiar toll that gathers the brothers like leaves on a breeze, drawn together not by desire, but by rhythm, by a silence deeper than thought. And so you follow the same corridor as before, past the same darkened corners and the same flickering candles, toward the same refectory that feels less like a dining hall and more like a pause in a sentence too long to speak aloud. The door creaks open, but no heads turn. The men already seated are still, hands folded, eyes lowered, as though they have always been here, waiting in this moment, preserved in stillness like relics behind glass. You take your place without invitation, because invitations require language, and language does not live here. Before you, a bowl not different from this morning's, not warmer, not more generous, holds a pale broth that steams faintly, as if embarrassed by its own presence. Beside it, A small heel of bread, denser than before, and a wooden cup of water that catches a sliver of light and does nothing with it. There are no utensils, no scent, no color, only the act of feeding, stripped of ceremony, reduced to necessity. The bread is dry, but you chew slowly, methodically, aware that the sound of your own mouth feels louder than it should, like a whisper in a cathedral, like a thought that should not have formed. Around you, the others do the same lifting, dipping, chewing, swallowing in a harmony so silent it becomes oppressive. There is no clatter, no murmur, no clearing of throats, just the faint rustle of robes, the occasional clink of a cup being set gently down, and the ever-present hum of rules being obeyed without thought. No one looks up, and you find yourself avoiding even the idea of eye contact, as if a glance might shatter the thin veil of control that holds the room together. The silence here is not passive, it feeds on you, grows with you, demands from you, and it becomes clear, as you sip the thin broth, that this meal is not for satisfaction, but for subduing. You remember meals that were shared, voices rising. In laughter or argument, the clatter of forks and the scent of something cooking in a room filled with light, and for a moment, the memory is so vivid that your hands tremble. But no one sees, and even if they did, nothing would be said. You are not hungry for food, not really. You are hungry for sound, for presence, for the soft, accidental moments of being human that are forbidden here. The rules are not spoken during the meal, but they are everywhere, carved into the corners of the table, sewn into the seams of the robes, lingering in the lowered gazes and measured bites. There is a rule for how to sit, how to lift the bread, how to drink, how to be grateful without appearing attached, how to exist without expression. And somehow the absence of talking makes the rules louder, more articulate, echoing in the chamber of your thoughts like chants with no melody, just rhythm, just expectation. You finish your meal and place your hands in your lap, waiting, because no one leaves before the bell, and the bell does not rush. The broth settles heavily in your stomach, not warming, but weighing, and the water leaves no taste behind, only the reminder that you are still here. Your back aches, your thoughts coil, but you remain motionless, part of the room now, another silent object in a space that punishes presence and rewards obedience. And then, finally, the bell tolls again, not loud, not abrupt, but final, and you rise with the others, not because you are full, but because it is time to stop. And as you step back into the corridor, your mind still tasting the silence, you realize hunger was easier to bear than this stillness, because at least hunger had a name. The sun is higher now, though you do not feel it. Its light reaches the earth, but not your skin. And even in the monastery's small walled garden, warmth feels like a rumor, something that once was and now is not permitted. You are led through a narrow archway into the open air, but the openness offers no freedom, only another kind of silence, this time wrapped in wind and birdsong too distant to count as company. A monk gestures without speaking, handing you a crude wooden tool and pointing toward a stretch of frozen soil where nothing seems to grow. And so you kneel, not in reverence, but in requirement, knees pressing into earth still hard with mourning. Frost, hands gripping the worn handle of the spade like it might anchor you to this moment, or to yourself. The ground does not yield easily. Each thrust of the tool is met with resistance, not just from the roots that run tangled beneath the surface, but from the earth itself, as though it too is bound by vow to remain, to endure, to refuse transformation. Your fingers grow numb, quickly, not just from cold, but from repetition. And as you dig, pull, dig again, you begin to notice how the soil smells, faintly bitter, like damp stone and old bread, and how each clump you turn over looks exactly like the last, as if time cannot pass here even in nature. Beside you, other monks work in silence, tending to patches of urban weed. Their movements slow, even without judgment, and yet you feel judged, not by them, but by the garden itself, by the fact that you do not know what you're planting, or why. only that something must be pulled from the ground to make room for something else that may never grow. Every weed you grasp feels dry, stubborn, familiar, like a thought you've tried to forget, and when you pull it loose, the small ripping sound is almost satisfying, though you don't allow yourself to notice that satisfaction for more than a moment, because this is not supposed to feel good. No one has told you what this labor is for. It is not a punishment, not explicitly, but it is not a gift either. It is a task, like the writing, like the walking, like the silence, something done not for result, but for the doing itself, for the way it shapes the soul, or perhaps erodes it. Your knees begin to ache, your spine tightens, and still you work. Because stopping is not permitted, and even if it were, you no longer trust yourself to know what stopping feels like. The cold seeps in through your robe, climbs the bones of your arms, and settles somewhere deep, somewhere thoughts live or used to. A small bird hops along the edge of the garden wall, head tilting toward you like it might speak, but it doesn't. Nothing does. You begin to wonder if anything ever has. Your breaths are shallow, not from exertion, but from care. Each inhale measured so it doesn't become noise. Each exhale held a second too long in case someone is listening for weakness. The earth beneath your fingernails darkens, your palms grow raw, and the hem of your robe soaks in the cold of the soil, dragging behind you like a shadow you cannot shake. You wonder, distantly, what sin this is penance for, not in the theological sense, but in the personal one. You wonder what wrongness lives inside you that can be corrected by tilling forgotten soil in a forgotten garden behind walls that forget the sun. But no answer comes. Only the dirt. Only the roots. Only the garden that neither welcomes nor rejects you. It simply receives your labor and says nothing in return. And when the bell finally tolls again, not as an end, but as a shifting of purpose, you rise on shaking legs, not cleansed, not punished. Just colder than before, and quieter than when you arrived. Your hands hang at your sides, stained and trembling, and you realize you have touched the earth not to feed it, but to be emptied by it. You are led down a narrower hall than the others, one lined with dark wood panels so worn they no longer reflect light, only absorb it, and as you pass under a short arch, your breath catches not from exertion, but from knowing where you are. Being taken. The room is small, intentionally so, with no windows, and only a single low bench beneath a wooden crucifix whose carved face seems more tired than merciful. You kneel not by instruction, but by intuition. The air tells you what to do. The walls press you downward. The scent of old stone and spent incense wraps around your shoulders like the memory of guilt. And when your knees touch the cold floor, something inside you falls a little further. Across from you, a priest or perhaps just another brother kneels, still and cloaked, face unreadable in the flickering shadow of the single candle between you. And you wait, not because you must, but because silence arrives before speech and stays longer. Got no words are asked of you. No gesture invites your voice. And so you search within, not for the truth, but for the shape of it, the outline of all that you carry and have not named. You think, at first, that you might speak, that you might find the strength to utter something small, a beginning, a fault, but the quiet around you is too thick, like wool soaked in cold water, and the moment stretches beyond reach. Your mouth opens slightly, closes again. Your eyes lower. Your hands rest loosely in your lap, as if waiting for instruction from a self that has not yet returned. The silence between you and the figure across. The stone is not absence, it is presence, heavy and breathing, full of suggestion and stillness. It is both witness and judge, both forgiveness and punishment, and in its shadow you begin to feel exposed in ways that language could never name. Because here, in this room, the act of withholding becomes the confession, and the silence says, more than you ever could. Your shoulders tense, your thoughts flutter, and you wonder, with a kind of ache, whether the other man sees you not as a sinner, but as someone simply failing to know what to be sorry for. The seconds pass without rhythm. The candle between you burns lower, its tiny flame swaying gently, as though it too is unsure what to make of you. And you begin to remember not specific sins, but shapes of them. Moments too vague to describe and too sharp to ignore. A lie you let go uncorrected. A kindness withheld out of pride. A moment of cowardice wrapped in reason, and though you say none of it aloud, you feel it press against the walls of your chest. Like water behind stone, waiting to break through. Still you kneel. Still he waits. Still nothing moves except the candle. And you realize, slowly, painfully, that perhaps confession was never about speech. Perhaps the words were always the least of it. And what mattered was this: the choosing to be seen. The choosing to sit in the stillness long enough for something to rise inside you, even if it never reaches your lips. You wonder if this is grace or simply endurance, and when at last he moves just slightly, just enough to suggest that it is over, you nod, though no one required it, and rise not with relief, but with a weight that now belongs to your legs, instead of your heart. The door opens without sound. The hall beyond looks no different than before, and yet, when you walk back into it, something is not cleaner, not lighter, but clearer, as though you've stepped not into absolution, but into the honest company of your own unfinished silence. The chapel gathers them before the sun has fully dipped behind the wall, though inside, it has long felt like dusk. The windows are narrow, colored not with stained glass, but with age, and the light that enters through them is thin, muted, filtered through centuries of quiet breath and unanswered prayers. You take your place along the cold wooden bench, among rows of bowed heads and still robes, the scent of beeswax and stone pressing down from every corner of the room. No one speaks, but a few already hum, not loudly, not musically, but as if reminding the space that voices still exist, even if they no longer belong to individuals. And then the first psalm begins, not as a performance, but as a ritual so old it forgets to ask why. You open the book, its cover cracked and soft like old bark, its pages uneven, some torn at the edges from generations of hands that turned them not in urgency, but in reverence, or perhaps in fatigue. The script is dense, the Latin familiar enough to follow but not enough to understand, and you mouth the words as they rise around you. Syllables dry in your throat, shapes your lips remember, even if your spirit does not. The chant flows in long, breathless lines, each note stretching like shadow, each word too slow to hold meaning, and yet they continue, page after page, voice after voice, until the sound becomes not a message but a mist. You listen, not with your ears but with your body, the hum of their unity vibrating in the bench beneath you, rising through your spine, curling at the edges of your vision. The psalms do not lift you, they do not carry you forward, or inward they circle. They loop, they gather like fog and sit there, heavy, unmoved. The monks do not sing with feeling. They do not sway, or close their eyes, or lift their hands. They recite as one, not to be heard, but to be repeated, and in that repetition, you search for meaning. You mouth the words. You mimic the rise and fall. You match the cadence, not because you know it, but because not doing so would be more noticeable than getting it wrong. And yet, even in this mimicry, you feel yourself drift not into devotion, but into something colder, something distant, something like watching rain fall through glass and knowing it won't reach you. Your voice joins theirs, and yet you remain alone, untouched by the unity, unmoved by the text. It is not doubt that you feel not quite but something quieter, an absence, a hollow, a sense that these words, however ancient, have forgotten how to find you. The final psalm stretches longer than the others. A brother near you falters slightly, and the whole room adjusts, effortlessly, without breaking like wind through a field bending but never pausing. And when it ends, no one breathes differently, no one lingers, no one wipes a tear or clasps their hands in reflection. The silence that follows is not spiritual, it is procedural. Like the space between two tasks, the breath between pages turning. You close the book gently and set it back on the ledge, your fingers trailing across the cover, not out of reverence, but to remind yourself that you are still here. As they file out, you follow, your footsteps matching theirs in rhythm, but not in resolve. Your faith, if that is still the word, feels like something left behind, like a candle that went out without anyone noticing. The chants echo faintly behind you, as if the stones remember more than you do, and you step into the corridor again. Not uplifted, not cleansed, but quieted not by peace, but by distance. The hall is darker now, though the day is not yet gone. Shadows have grown longer, not because of the sun's absence, but because you have forgotten how light once looked when it touched your skin. You walk without urgency, because urgency does not belong here. Your steps echo faintly behind you, but even they seem reluctant to follow, as though the quiet itself is tired of being filled. You reach your cell and pause before entering, though there is no lock, no barrier, nothing to stop you but the memory of what this place felt like the last time you closed the door behind you. The room is unchanged. The stone is still the same kind of cold that feels personal, as if it has memorized the shape of your doubt. The candle remains unlit. You notice this without surprise, and the small wooden plank that serves as a bed sits in the same place, waiting like an old question that no longer needs to be answered. You sit down because there is nothing else to do, and because standing requires decision, and decisions here feel loud. Your hands rest in your lap. They are not dirty anymore, but they do not feel clean. The garden's chill still lingers in your bones, and the psalms hum quietly at the edge of your mind, not in melody, but in rhythm, like a muscle that continues to twitch long after the movement is gone. You try to breathe deeply, but even your own breath feels like an intrusion in this space. The cell does not welcome you back. It simply resumes. You lie down slowly, as if the air might crack if disturbed. The mattress, if it can be called that, offers no comfort, no softness, only a place to rest your spine against the memory of everything the day has asked of you. The ceiling stares back, a slab of shadow just out of reach, and you wonder if the brothers feel what you feel. This quiet unraveling that begins not with pain, but with the absence of resistance. You have followed every step, kept every silence, mouthed every word, and yet something inside you feels unthreaded, like a garment pulled loose from the inside seam. You do not cry. There is no drama here, only a dull ache that is not sadness. Not exactly, more like recognition, the slow understanding that whatever you brought into this place, whatever belief or self or shape you once held, it has shifted, slightly, unspoken. Like a stone that settles deeper into the earth without anyone noticing. Outside, the wind brushes against the thick walls, a sound too soft to name, and yet loud enough to remind you that the world continues without you. Your eyes close, not in sleep, but in retreat, and as the darkness behind your lids meets the darkness of the room, you feel the line between you and this place blur. You are not held here by force, but you are not free either. And as the last light of day slips into something darker, you begin to understand. You have survived the hours, yes, the bells, the books, the silence, the work, but you are no longer the version of yourself that entered at morning. Something has changed, not broken, not healed, just changed, like a word spoken once and never again, leaving only the echo of its meaning behind. The last bell rings, not with urgency, not with celebration, just once, low and distant, like a memory slipping behind the hills. The chapel has emptied. The corridors have dimmed. The sun, what little of it ever reached the walls, has vanished completely now, and dusk lays itself like a shawl over every stone, every bench, every breath. You do not move. Not because you are tired, though you are, but because movement feels loud, and you have grown too used to the quiet. The evening prayers are finished, the books closed, the sandals set neatly by the door. No one says goodnight. No one needs to. You already know it will not be a night for dreaming. The silence does not end when the voices stop. It lingers, not around you, inside you. It has moved from the stones into your bones, from the cell into your chest. You feel it sitting between your ribs, not heavy, but firm, like the weight of a vow you never meant to take. You walk back to your cell not as someone retreating from the day, but as someone who no longer expects tomorrow to feel different. The walls do not greet you. The cold has not changed. And yet something has. You rest your hand on the door before entering, and in that moment, you understand. This place has given you nothing, no answers, no comfort, no divine fire, and yet it has taken something you cannot name. Inside, you sit. You do not light the candle. You do not pray. There are no more prayers left in you. You are not angry. You are not even disappointed. You are simply still. The silence is not peaceful. It is not warm. It is not cruel either. It is simply what remains when everything else has gone quiet. You think about the first bell this morning, the cold bread, the garden soil, the flickering chant, and they feel like someone else's memories now. Not because you have forgotten, but because you have stepped just far enough away from yourself to observe the person you were when you arrived. He would not last a second night. And you, the one who remains, does not need to. Outside the slit of a window, stars are beginning to arrive. You do not rise to see them. You no longer need proof of the sky. It is enough to know it is there, waiting, silent as always. You close your eyes not to sleep, but to listen, not to sound, but to the space where sound used to be. This silence is yours now. It will follow you. You carry it not like a burden, but like a scar, invisible, internal, undeniable. One day was enough, more than enough. That you do not decide to leave. You do not decide to stay. You simply exist now in a moment that stretches beyond time, beyond ritual, beyond even belief. You wonder if this is what the monks feel every night, or if they too wrestle with the sound of nothing long after the prayers have ended. But it doesn't matter. Your story is not theirs. Your silence is your own. The candle on the shelf remains unlit. The air remains still. And you, not broken, not whole, sit in the center of a night that has no end. Only continuation. Sleep does not come. Peace does not arrive. Only this. The soundless hum of what remains when all is finished.